I think I know 2 or 3 or 4 others. Solid talent. People that I respected, worked with, did fantastic work with. And they've been now struggling for, 12, 18 months to land a gig. And that kind of makes you wonder, well, how did this thing actually happen?
I'm a top 10, top 5% head of sales in this kind of role. But now I have to compete with all these CROs and all these VPs and ex-founders. And all of a sudden, I'm like quite packed in the middle.
I think it isn't only VCs and founders getting effed. I think it's also a lot of careers being burned in the process. Today, Raul and I are discussing a terrifying statistic that we stumbled over recently. 25% of Pavilion members, that is 1 out of 4, is currently sitting on the bench. Industry veterans, senior folks that cannot find a job right now. We're going to discuss why that is, and the reason isn't just AI. But most importantly, we're going to talk about what people can do to get unstuck from that situation. As usual, reach out to Toni at attiv.ai for comments, and make sure you hit subscribe for the show. Enjoy.
So I did a mental tally of great people I know who are currently out of a job, including actually you and me. By strict definition, you don't have a job because you're not employed.
Hey,
I don't have a
founder.
job.
I'm running a business.
Is being a founder being employed?
Okay, good philosophical question. I would say yes. I'm pretty busy all day long. I don't get paid much because we're bootstrapping, obviously. So if you want to support that, go over to attiv.ai and kind of sign up. But otherwise, maybe you're right. Maybe we're in between. We're in between being fully employed and being fully unemployed.
So I feel the same way. So I, by definition, I actually have 2 companies right now, but I'm actually unemployed for a year and a half, and I'm doing really well, thank you. But I know a lot of people who are great at what they're doing, who are currently looking for something, or have actually been doing that for quite a while. And I think that this is quite stressful for these people. For me, and as far as I can tell you, we're doing quite well, but we've also found maybe a different lane. But what do you do if you're really stressed about this right now?
No, exactly. And I think just to kind of build this out a little bit further, so I just recently talked to a good friend of mine, and he mentioned, so he's deep in the Pavilion community, and he just mentioned that according to his estimates, and they sometimes have like those calls in there, he sees 25% of Pavilion members being, quote, on the bench. That's their way of saying unemployed right now. So 25% of Pavilion members currently out of a job, looking for a job. Isn't that crazy?
Especially because Pavilion is probably not the average group of SaaS people, or like the average group of people working in tech. And I would assume that they're probably, I don't know if they're necessarily better, although that might be the case, but they're probably more employed and better connected, which typically should lead to a higher employment rate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I know 2 or 3 or 4 others that have now been struggling to get it. Like solid talent, people that I respected, worked with, did fantastic work with, and they've been now struggling for 12, 18 months to land a gig. And that's pretty crazy, right? And that kind of makes you wonder, well, how did this thing actually happen, right? And what I think is frustrating is, we've all been totally understanding of, there's a SaaS recession. That's why all of those companies are going bust. That's why all this VC money is kind of disappearing to thin air. But what people are forgetting is that there were teams in those companies that then had to be laid off into a market of SaaS companies that were all failing. So, kind of people are forgetting that little nuance there, right? So I think it isn't only VCs and founders getting effed, in this recession. I think it's also a lot of careers being burned in the process, right? And I think there's like an overall thing, and we're going to get into some of those examples, right? But very quickly, those CVs, they look like a piece of shit when you think about it, right? So let's just say you as an exec joined an early stage team, took on a bunch of risk. The team didn't go anywhere. And then it looks like, because it's going to be a random logo, right? Kind of the team didn't make it. The company didn't make it. So, who's that company? So you don't get any plus ones from having a great logo. But also maybe the stint was only 9 months, 12 months, because that's when they filed for bankruptcy, right? So it's really not your fault. So then you're out of a job for maybe 3 to 6 months. You find another job, maybe similar story, because you couldn't afford to be super picky. Like, oh no, I'm only going to go for the C-level safe bet now. They couldn't do that. So they had to go for, whatever was in front of them. And some of them just had double bad luck. Joined another team, got, effed again, didn't work out again. It was again the company, sure. And you know what? Those folks are probably the most humble that I know, that also say like, no, maybe I could have done a better job, and maybe kind of that would have helped the company overall, yada, yada. We all know, though, that that's probably not the reason why the company failed in the end, right? So now they're there in the job market, having 2 shitty logos on their CVs, 2 short stints with like time in between, and everyone looking at this like, can't hire this, forget about it, let's just go to the next one, right? And I think this is the reality for a bunch of really, really strong people out there, and it's kind of getting worse and worse actually, because on the one hand side, AI is here, all the playbooks are changing, everything is different now, and on the other side, those CVs, with every month going by, they kind of get worse and worse, basically. It's like, wow, now it's been 7 months and you've been on a quote unquote sabbatical. Now it's been 8 months and you're consulting. Now it's been 9 months, you know what I mean? And it's kind of that's I think what's out there, and that's what's leading to a bunch of really talented people not getting employed. And they're kind of just looking for answers and solutions right now. And I think today we wanted to talk about that a little bit.
And to be really concrete, so I'm working with 3 companies right now who are hiring a head of sales, one of which I'm really, really deep into supporting them with that as well. I can not remember a time in the last 7 or 8 years where there was such an inflow of people looking for a head of sales role, specifically people who are actually way too senior for that role. So we're talking people who had like managing director experience. We're talking people who've had 5 to 10 years of CRO experience, looking for a head of role. And I'm doing interviews with them, I'm doing background checks with them, and I'm asking them, man, like, are you sure this is what you want? Like, is this not a step back for you? And obviously they find a way to talk themselves into that and everything, but you can see and you can feel when you talk to them that they're used to a different package, and they're used to kind of a different role and kind of different things. And some of them have switched over to, well, let's just build something new. This is kind of a new start. And they're quite happy to get something. But I am seeing that, and I have never seen so many CROs applying to a head of role that I kind of have to deal with right now.
I mean, this is one of the things we wanted to get into further down, actually. Kind of, I'm calling it taking the more junior role, right? Kind of, that's the CRO stepping down to VP or even head of. And I think to a degree, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because it's kind of better than nothing. Like having a job is better than not having any job. But then the hiring manager, aka you in this situation, it's kind of a yellowish, maybe orange, almost reddish kind of flag, right? Kind of, and if you do go for that person, you kind of always have to wonder, well, is he maybe continuing to looking until he finds a job that, matches what he was actually kind of looking for, and kind of then you sit there again with the same problem, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword, actually, I think. Would this be one of our recommendations what people should be doing? I don't know. It's a difficult one to tell, right? I think the issue that, when I talk to some of those folks that are looking for a long time, that I see like a lot, and it's, I don't want to say it's heartbreaking, but it's pretty kind of serious, actually. It's actually mental health issues, right? Kind of, if you have been an overachiever for your whole career, let's just say the sales example. You've maybe been an SDR, and then an AE, then a director, then a VP, and maybe even a CRO. Kind of, you ran the whole thing. You had crazy packages. You've been running on 120% all the time. You've been maybe even neglecting and sacrificing some of your personal life to kind of optimize for your job. And suddenly you find yourself out of one for like a year or two. That messes with you, that messes with your head, right? And the thing is not only that, hey, it's kind of, relax, just chill, kind of focus more time on on you, go for a run, spend some time with your kids, kind of do that stuff. It's really difficult for those overachievers to do that because they're like constantly thinking, no, I should be looking for a job. And, I can't relax until I have a job. And then when they do get a job, it's like, oh no, can you start Monday actually? And it's really messing with them. It's really messing with them. And I'm not sure if I have like great advice, but trying, one guy that I've talked to and, he knows a job and is kind of super happy with it. What he did actually was like, no, you know what, those 3 months, that time, I'm actually not going to even try and look for a job. I'm just going to, that time I'm just going to take to relax. It's my, on purpose chill time. And I'm going to do all kinds of healthy things in there and having fun and not killing myself by thinking about getting a job all the time. And then when those 3 months were up, kind of he was starting to focus on finding the job, right? And I think that helped him to be super, like at least healthy, right? And I'm not sure if that helps anyone, but try and find a way to not constantly be job searching, because getting all of those no's, they're also on top of this messing with your head.
One thing that's also really messing, and I just talked about kind of the highest level, which is the CROs are applying to head of titles and everything. So in one company, I'm looking for a head of, and at the same time also for an account manager. And funnily, what happens is that kind of this whole thing trickles down, where I have for account managers, people applying that were previously heads. Mm-hmm. And one of them actually told me, and obviously this is kind of just an interview, you don't really know the person yet, but it was very clear that they were struggling with the fact that and I thought that they were a great candidate for a head actually, they couldn't get a head of role because all those CROs were taking those roles. And that was really taking a toll on them. It's like, man, like I used to be like, I'm a top 10, top 5% head of sales in this kind of role. But now I have to compete with all these CROs and all these VPs and ex-founders and whatever people are there. And all of a sudden, I'm like quite packed in the middle all with them, because obviously when you can get a CRO and you could get them, and why not take them? And it kind of trickles down to account executives who are now happily taking SDR jobs over not having a job at all, who were previously making 300K and now maybe breaking 120 or 150.
Yeah.
But I think I really like the way that your friend there did it, because one of the things that I really have learned more and more over time, especially now in the last year and a half, is that you really have to break from this end-to-end connection of input and output in your mind, and that really can open up your kind of your world to lots of things. Now, making that very concrete, what do I mean with that? So, applying for 100 jobs, looking at it as a funnel, and then kind of getting 5 offers is a very input-output driven ends to means relationship, right? And that is typically how a lot of execs and people from the SaaS world are thinking, and they're kind of brute forcing their way through that application funnel to get to a new job. But what about if you flip the script and you're like, well, maybe this is the time to finally take 3 to 6 months to actually network, which haven't done for the last 5 years because I never had the time, and just go to every damn event there is, and there's lots of them, and just go to like every lunch with a person that I never got back to, and see what happens there. And funnily enough, obviously it's not always so clear what comes from what, but basically I've been writing that for the last year and a half, and that's been probably much better than if I had just kind of went through a funnel view, which is like, talk to those people in the last 10 years I got to meet, like go to events, see what happens.
But I think that also has a different perspective to it that you're kind of not mentioning here, right? Which is basically, and I see this many people do, start some kind of a consulting gig, consulting work kind of thing, right? And I kind of have 2 perspectives on this. One is, I think you should do it in general. You should just do it. Like, totally go and do it. Do it for no money. Do it for free. Do it, maybe charge a little bit, but don't act like this is your main and only gig, right? Kind of simply do it to keep your mind sharp. Do it to get introduced to people, and good things will come from you going out and doing some of that. It will also, I think the other thing, if you've been on the bench for 2 years, it's like, well, this whole AI thing happened in the last 2 years. Kind of, does this guy have any clue about the new playbooks? And if you're doing some consulting work outside, it's a much easier story to tell also in the interviewing process, that you're kind of keeping your mind sharp and you have your eye on the ball and you know what's happening and you have maybe a good AI story to tell, right? The other thing is, which is kind of what you've been doing, is really going hard and all in on the consulting thing. And I think it's just not for everyone. It's difficult to pull this off, right? And I think if you are good at being a consultant and getting into those jobs and into those roles and into those projects, I think immediately the power balance is also different. It's like, oh, could we maybe hire this guy full time? Like I know he has like 5 other clients he was doing, working with, but like maybe we can snack him. And kind of that attitude, that situation, that used to be true when you were in a job and someone tried to hire you out of it, you immediately were like so much more desirable, right? Kind of this is what everyone is experiencing when they're like available on the job market. It's like, well, I don't really have anything, so de facto I'm the less attractive girl or less attractive boy or something like this, right? But by doing consulting full time, and if you're actually good at that, I think that power dynamic changes immediately. But also, being a consultant, not everyone is good at that stuff. Like I don't think I'm a great consultant, by the way.
Adding to that, one concrete reason why that's also the fact, and I've seen this also firsthand, is when you're a consultant, naturally your rates are much higher than what your wage would be if you kind of average it out to 40 hours a week. And that has to be the case because you pay your own insurance, you kind of have to do a little bit of saving and all that kind of stuff. So there's legitimate reasons for that. But when you come from that point and you're kind of doing an okay job, in the minds of kind of the company, it is that much more attractive just from a cost saving perspective to be like, hey, we're working with this Tony guy. We're paying him 10K for 20 hours a week. Why can't we just get him over to 40 hours a week and get him full time and pay him 15 or 12 or whatever? Yeah. And that is a different starting point than we don't even know this Tony guy. He wants a job with us, right? So in one scenario, I'm saving money. Now, psychologically, I think that makes a big difference. But I think this is kind of a very good route for a lot of people in there. The difficulty, and that's what you were going to go into, is that, so I have been really in this consulting game for 10, 11 years now. And so the one thing I can tell you is if you want to do it really well and you want to actually go all in, is consulting is a skill set of its own. You're not naturally a good consultant because you are good at A, B, C. You have to kind of add the skill set of A on top of consulting skill sets, which you're hopefully developing, to then be able to do that well. And obviously you could always do consulting, whatever. And maybe in the case of doing it for free, which going back to that was a great point you made. Very much underestimated in my opinion as well. I haven't talked about this very much, but I've had 3 companies in the last year and a half that I worked with for completely free. So I haven't made a single euro off of them. Maybe they've invited me for dinner sometimes or whatever, for different reasons. I like the team. I just thought that maybe something might come out of that. And sometimes I got real great introductions to other companies. Sometimes I learned some interesting things. But that was something I did quite consciously when I thought that I really felt like that was a good thing to do. In every single case, something great came out of that. And it was not always clear necessarily upfront what that great thing would be.
So we kind of tapped on some of the kind of obvious ones. Maybe there's some good advice packaged into this. I wanted to take us a little bit more to the non-obvious ones. And the first one on our list was actually to consider leaving SaaS and tech behind. Just walk away. Just kind of, I know all of this is cool. And, if you're listening to this podcast, I know you're into that kind of stuff. But maybe now's the time to just leave that behind and do something else. A good friend of mine, worked at a big tech company, jumped into another gig, didn't work out, got kind of canned like really quickly, and is now selling luxury objects. And is doing like those are really high ticket luxury objects. So it's not real estate, but something else. And it's he's doing fantastically well with that stuff, right? Another friend of mine basically kind of said straight up, Tony, I'm done with all of this SaaS scaling bullshit. I'm just over it. I want to, build a family. I want to have a 9-to-5. I want to have a secure job. That is actually kind of what is really important to me. So I'm going to look specifically now for a corporate job, like jumping into, here in Denmark, into big pharma. And there's a couple of adjacent kind of industries here. And doing a fantastic job in doing exactly that, right? And one of the conversations I had with him specifically was also like, okay, so I'm now mid-end 30s. Jesus, Yeah, a mid-end 30s. And the question you need to ask yourself to a degree is like, how many more SaaS gigs do you have in yourself? Like, how many more times will this happen, right? Because I don't believe that this super hot startup happening in 10, 20 years from now, that they're looking for this 50-something-year-old guy to come in and do some stuff. I just don't believe that, right? So, I think there's a half-life on how long and how often you can be a tech executive until you need to step out of that. And it's a little bit like being a professional soccer player or something like this. Like, in your early 30s, kind of this thing is over, right? And then there are only so many jobs to be a coach or a moderator on TV. Kind of, you need to look for your second leg of a career. Well, in big corporate, you don't have that issue. Like, here in Denmark, in Novo Nordisk, you can die at your job. Like, totally, this is totally a trajectory, kind of being 65, retiring in this company is totally part of how this company works out. And you can do the jump in 10 years, you can do the jump now and kind of leave tech behind. But still, you should still listen to this podcast though. Like, that's still that's still pretty important.
That was a great catch again. So, I mean, corporate is obviously one route, and corporate is such a big field. So there are so many different things to do there. I know for me, you probably, hopefully will never catch me there, but that's for different reasons, not necessarily kind of the career reasons and everything. But hey, who knows like what's going to happen and how corporate is going to develop. But I know so many people for who this would be a great thing. And maybe just like listening to this and being like, okay, let's really think about this is a good input there as well. But then going maybe into a different direction, right? So obviously like SaaS is just a business model, right? And tech and startups are so much more than just SaaS in themselves, even though obviously SaaS is a big one. Just going into kind of like adjacent models, like or adjacent industries that kind of have something to do with that. I've seen one person that kind of did a great transition to private equity. And sure, this is maybe not open for everyone. So if you're an early stage SDR kind of with 2 years of experience, maybe not going to happen. Maybe, yes, I wish you the best, but this can be a lane for some people, right? So this can be very attractive. It's about the skill set that you've acquired of scaling. It's about the skill set that you've acquired of like growth and even like cost efficient growth, but then also growth at all costs, seeing all that through different times, bringing different departments together. This is not just interesting to a SaaS startup. So I think what I would like you to do as a listener is just like maybe think a bit more abstract about your skills. And I've always said this, like, I believe that like, this idea of, I've had 10 years of SaaS experience, I'm good for a SaaS company, is just bullshit. And it's the same way around for a recruiter. This is why, for example, when I look for people to hire, I don't actually care very much whether they've been in this field necessarily. What I care about is their abstract skills. And what I care about is, what is the job? Hey, the job consists of doing these 10 things, scale this, do that, bring these people together, lead these people. Where could I find this? If you put this into an abstract, some people that I know are maybe not even only CROs, could be great fits for consultancies, VC, depending on what kind of VC. Obviously, Project A is open to many, many different things, but there's others that are looking for operating partners, that are looking for head of platforms, and private equity as well. And those industries still pay very well and are very attractive. And funnily enough, can then be a jumping stone again for whatever kind of company comes after. So this can be a much more fluid affair than, oh fuck, I'm done with SaaS. Now I have to go into boring old corporate, even though I don't want to.
Yeah. So I think that's a good one. I think kind of jumping into the VC private equity world, for some people listening, it sounds like, okay, cool. Thank you, Raul. I'll tell my 2 friends that maybe could do that. But I think another perspective on this is also for everyone that's listening that's maybe not looking for a job because they are having a job and maybe they're hiring a manager. I think there's also a little bit of a mindset change that, might need to happen, right? So as I mentioned this in the intro, as we've all recognized that there was a SaaS recession, that things went south, and it had a problem on your customer acquisition costs and had, an impact on, the companies that you were selling to and all of that jazz. It also had an impact on the careers of the people that worked in those companies that suddenly weren't your customers anymore, right? And looking at those CVs and judging them simply by saying like, 2 short stints and out, I think that it's not only not fair anymore, but it's also just not adjusted for reality. It's not a good way to scan those CVs. I guess that's what I'm actually trying to say, right? There's still like fantastic talent out there in kind of whatever shape or form, but using this as the main way of scanning, someone's worth by seeing there were kind of a couple of short stints, I don't think this works so well anymore. Kind of that used to work extremely well 10 years ago. I used this a lot, and I probably have kind of used this also in the last couple of years. But I think, especially for that period, 22, 24, I think you should be a bit more careful in, kind of figuring out how to judge those LinkedIn profiles when you are going out and potentially looking for someone to hire.
That's a big one. That's a very big one. I mean, so I know this is hard for recruiters in general, but I'm very firmly a believer that CVs are severely overrated, and you just don't look at better things because you don't know how, or like you're just not looking outwards to other things. But you're completely right that CVs matter much less than they did before. And if you flip the script even a little bit more, this is a huge opportunity. So obviously change like what things mean and how to interpret things. Oh, a 2-year sabbatical was a bad thing. Well, maybe it's not actually a bad thing at all, but flip the script on what these things mean. But then also, okay, so there's good SaaS people out there in the market right now. Let's link this to another topic. So one of the advices you can find when you went through a bad breakup, right? One of the first things that people actually told me is think about also because you want her back and you want all that stuff and whatever. Like, think about the stuff that you didn't like about the person, right? Think about the stuff that maybe actually wouldn't have worked out. Like, don't over romanticize. And maybe this is something that if you're a SaaS person also can help as well, is like, think about the stuff that you didn't like about SaaS. And there's tons of downsides to SaaS as well, from the working hours to the whatever party culture, if you're not interested in that, to maybe the colleagues and whatever. I know this is certainly the case for me. So I know the things that I know by now what I really didn't like about the last thing I did, which is about like a lot about morals and about the kind of people I work with and all that stuff. Now, going back to the recruiter, if you want to get SaaS people, well, maybe you have to understand what kind of stuff they didn't like and be that much more attractive in what you can offer, right? And that way you can maybe actually snag some people if you're open to them and be whatever they're looking for, which they didn't even realize before they were not. So to make this very concrete, if I have you as a SaaS CRO right in front of me, maybe part of the selling that I will do to get you to come to my company as a recruiter will have a lot to do with finding out what you didn't like at your last job and making clear that this is not the case here. And when people are waking up more and more to this, I think that this will be kind of a nice transition as well. And maybe this is the case for your Novo Nordisk person, right? So for your friend who went into corporate, is he realized what he didn't like. He realized some of the risks of staying in the field for too long, and he was looking for the exact opposite.
And I think that is a great place to end the show here today, Raul. We talked about a bunch of stuff, actually, and all of this has to do with fantastic people. Like, honestly, fantastic people that, I can, put my hand into fire for. I'm not sure if this translates well. That are, struggling to find a job. I think those folks aren't alone. And, if I believe those stats that I'm seeing from, Pavilion and so forth, then that's certainly kind of what it is. So what we're really hoping for is that some of this helped you folks to, maybe, find a different perspective to what you're kind of struggling through, and or giving some of the folks that are listening that are hiring people to try and kind of see, that this might kind of change their approach to whom they're selecting into the interview process and so forth, right? Because things have certainly changed. Raul, thank you so much. Thanks everyone else for listening. I hope you have already hit subscribe. Otherwise, please do it right now. It's free, and it actually helps us, build the show and grow the show.
And stay unemployed for longer.
Yeah, exactly. And on this topic, if you want to support the show by being a sponsor, talk to a bunch of go-to-market operations leaders, please let me know, Toni@attiv.ai. Otherwise, have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Next week is going to be very, very special. We are going to leak Jacco's new playbook in the age of AI. So far, he's only talked about this in a couple of closed-door events, but I actually got my hands on his detailed step-by-step talk track to go from what's happening and why, what are industry's leaders doing, and what can you do concretely today in order to build towards that. Those pockets are melting away and are getting smaller and smaller. Email and spam filters are improving more and more. Ads are getting more expensive and being less so actually recognized by people. There is a desire from people to buy things. How do those two things actually work together now? Well, the way people are purchasing things has changed a little bit.
Having control over the funnel is something that gives them a lot of comfort. When the shit hits the fan, we'll take 1 week, we'll just sit down for a week, do nothing else and do calls, and then we'll be fine. Well, now I'm supposed to have the customer bring me new customers. Just is a loss of control, first of all.
How can you get to the point where you stop thinking about deals and customers and start thinking about users instead?